Good morning. I'm glad you were able to make it today. I hope your day's been blessed. Today we're going to talk about Bloom's taxonomy, and I feel that you can use this in all aspects of your education goals for your students. So Bloom's taxonomy was developed to provide a common language for teachers to discuss and exchange learning lessons and assessment methods. Specific learning outcomes can be derived from the taxonomy, though it is most commonly used to assess learning on a variety of cognitive levels. The tables in the following slides define each cognitive level from higher to lower order thinking. My hope for you is that by the end of this lesson, you will be able to develop and provide a framework of organizing a continuum for your underlying structure. Now, this is Dr. Bloom, and he created the pyramid of taxonomy. Dr. Benjamin Bloom and a team of educational psychologists created Bloom's taxonomy in the 1950s to promote higher order thinking in education, moving beyond rote memorization to encourage analysis, evaluation, and synthesis of knowledge. The primary goal of Bloom's taxonomy was to provide a framework for categorizing educational learning objectives and to encourage educators to focus on developing students' critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Bloom's taxonomy of the cognitive domain is a classification of the different levels of thinking. It is important because it creates achievable learning goals that teachers and students understand and build a definitive plan to meet them. Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical, meaning that learning at the higher levels, is dependent on having attained prerequisite knowledge and skills at lower levels. Each level of Bloom's taxonomy should be addressed before moving on to the next. When course planning, bear in mind the implications. How quickly to introduce new concepts, when to reinforce them, and how to test them. The first stage, knowledge, is about recalling facts and concepts. A student can define and duplicate, make a list, memorize points, repeat information, and make valid statements, but this does not prove that they have a comprehension of what they are trying to learn. The behavioral learning outcomes in this step is the ability to recall appropriate learned information on command. The cognitive learning outcomes in this step is the lowest level of learning outcomes. Some of the appropriate teaching and learning methods for this step are lectures, memorizations, readings, podcasts, videos, and web information. Now, some of the learning activities you can use with your students are flashcards, highlight keywords, lists, memory activities, reading materials, watching presentations and videos, and some of the assessments that you can give them are clicker questions, fill in the blanks, labels, match, multiple choice, quizzes, and true and false questions. This is where comprehension, the next level, comes in. The student explains ideas and concepts, discusses and describes a topic in detail, explains what the topic is, recognizes it, and translates the facts in some way. They can paraphrase a point or compare and contrast information. The behavioral learning outcomes for this step is the student being able to translate materials from one form or format to another by explaining or summarizing and predicting consequences or effects. The cognitive learning outcome represents the lowest level of understanding and interpretation of rote, factual information. The appropriate teaching and learning methods you should use at this step are readings, graphic organizers, demonstrations, and discussions. Some of the learning activities in this step are using case studies, concept maps, demonstrations, diagrams, flow charts, gamifications, group discussions, light boards, mind maps, matrix activities, plays or sketches, summarizations, or think, pair, and share. And the assessments you might want to give are concept maps, create a summary, essays, diagrams, infographics, matrix activities, 1 minute paper, presentations, provide examples, quizzes, and short answers. Now, once comprehension is conquered, students move up the pyramid to the next stage of learning, application. The students use the information they've learned in new situations, whether to solve a problem, demonstrate an idea, interpret, schedule, sketch, whichever method works for the specific type of learning course of study and/or class environment. Now, the behavioral learning outcomes in this step are a bit more intense. They should be able to apply learned material such as rules, methods, concepts, principles, laws, and theories. And their cognitive learning outcomes should demonstrate a higher level of understanding of the mechanics of employing information to a purpose than comprehension. Some of the teaching and learning methods in this step also become more involved. They are demonstrating problem solving, like case studies, text problems, scenarios. They demonstrate applications of rules, laws, or theories. This is also in case studies, text problems, and scenarios. They should be able to demonstrate methods or procedures and practice in multiple concepts. Some of the learning activities in this step are to calculate, case studies, concept map, creating examples, demonstrations, group work, lab experiments, mapping, problem-solving tasks, short answers, and role play. And the assessments to give are discussion board posts, e-portfolios, lab reports, 1-minute papers, presentations, problem-solving tasks, short answers, and tests. Now, this next step is where they now must draw connections between ideas in the analysis level of Bloom's taxonomy. They can differentiate, organize, relate, compare, contrast, examine, question, or test their knowledge. Critical thinking finally comes into play at this level as the student distinguishes between fact and opinion and breaks information down into component parts. Now, as you can see from their behavioral learning outcomes, they are able to develop multiple conclusions concerning the motives, causes, inferences, and generalizations that can be derived from the material's component parts and organization. And their cognitive learning outcomes involve a comprehension and understanding of the content and structure of the material. The teaching and learning methods for the analysis stage are more individual. They are case studies, simulations like computer-based mannequins, part task trainers, role plays, discussions, labs, and graphic organizers. Now, in the analysis step, some of the learning activities you can give are case studies. You can compare and contrast with charts, tables, or Venn diagrams. You can use a concept map, debates, discussions, flowcharts, graphs, group investigations, mind maps. You can use questionnaires or reports and surveys. And some of the assessments you might want to give are to give them to do as an analysis paper, case studies, evaluation criteria, critique hypothesis and procedures, muddiest point, 1-minute papers, research paper, or review papers. In the synthesis stage, students are now using new and creative applications of prior knowledge and skills. The behavioral learning outcomes have given the students the ability to produce a new or original end product. Examples include a unique communication, plan of operations like research proposal, or abstract relations, information classification scheme. Their cognitive learning outcomes at this step emphasize creativity and the creation of unique patterns or structures. Great teaching and learning methods at this stage include research labs, plan developments, multiple case studies, class or small group discussions, assembling relevant information to produce a hypothesis, plan to address recurring problems, interviews with experts. Learning activities in the synthesis step could be brainstorming, decision-making tasks, develop and describe new solutions or plans, performances, presentations, research projects, or written assignments. And the assessments could be develop criteria to evaluate product or solutions, grant proposals, outline alternative solutions, and research proposals. In the last stage, the evaluation stage, they have accomplished a lot and the student can now justify a stand or decision by appraising a situation, arguing, defending, judging, critiquing, supporting, or weighing in with thoughts based on the knowledge and application they've acquired thus far. In their behavioral learning outcomes, the student is now able to produce an end product that fulfills a given purpose rather than being right or wrong. The cognitive learning outcomes are at the highest because it contains all other categories and includes value judgments based on clearly defined criteria. And at this point, your teaching and learning methods are at the highest. They can include the ability to demonstrate process for evaluating research, reports based on criteria, and case studies within small group discussions of appropriateness of procedures, results, and debates. In the evaluation steps, some of the learning activities you might want to give are debates, compare and contrast with charts, tables, and Venn diagrams again, concept maps also, journals, a pros and cons list, a mind map, and review paper. The assessments might be argumentative or persuasive essays, debates, discussions, presentations, provide alternative solutions, and a report. Now, Bloom's taxonomy is further divided into 3 distinct learning objectives or domains of educational activities. Cognitive domain, which is the knowledge and development of intellectual skills. The affective domain, where students have new feelings or emotions about the subject and or themselves. They will place more value on something and have a greater appreciation for it. And psychomotor domain, students develop manual or physical skills. And there are 3 versions. There's a physical movement, coordination, and the use of motor skills. These are also referred to by the acronym KSA for knowledge, which is cognitive, skills, which is psychomotor, and attitudes, which is affective. Now, the goal is that by the end of a learning session, your student will have acquired new knowledge, skills, and attitudes towards a subject. There are several reasons why you want to implement Bloom's taxonomy. You can use it to increase your understanding of the education process. You will be able to see and understand complex cognitive developments and how the lower level skills build into a higher order thinking. Using this understanding will help you prioritize materials needed for the class and organization of lessons to maximize your class time. Now, as an educator, you face confusion and multiple standards of curriculum requirements. By using Bloom's taxonomy, you are given a framework for breaking the different criteria down into accessible bites, which you can use to order your day-to-day lesson plans and compare them to your goals for your class. Now that you've learned one of the most important ideas to implement, in my opinion, Bloom's taxonomy, let's move on to other ways to create a successful classroom, creating successful students. Now, in the end, your learning objectives should have clearly defined outcomes. Be sure you are clearly articulating what your students should know, understand, and in the end to be able to do upon the completion of your course. Your objectives and assessments should ensure that the assessments you assign accurately measure the learning objectives. And lastly, in learning objectives, you need to tailor your objectives to the specific needs and context of your students. You need to be sure that you choose relevant material, organize your content effectively, and utilize diverse resources. For your assessments, be sure to use formative and summative assessments, providing meaningful feedback and align the assessments with your learning objectives. Now, another good resource to implement in your class is the method of using a rubric. A rubric is used as our scoring tool to evaluate graded work. A rubric is created by dividing the work you assign into different parts. And in the assigned parts, you will provide clear descriptions of the characteristics of the work that is associated with each part with varying levels of skill. Now, to find out more about rubrics and how they can make you a successful instructor, click on the link for my tutorial video. As it is stated in a book, Teaching Online by Susan Coe and Steve Rawson, if you are teaching adult learners, it's a good idea to incorporate some key adult learning principles, not only into the design of learning activities, but also to factor these into your approach to communicating and providing feedback to your students. Next, in scaffolding, An assignment or assignments is the way you incrementally arrange the tasks or series of assignments that will allow your students to gradually build on the knowledge and skills you give them. And this can provide them with the necessary support resources. The next item to consider is a low-stake assignment. These are ungraded, or they may be in an assignment that is of a low percentage of the grade. These are valuable as they can build confidence in your student. And you start with small tasks within a scaffolding series of assignments, and these would be no more than 1 to 10% of the grade. And lastly, for you to consider is your course development. And this is where you will start to build your course, and this includes the development of a syllabus, class schedule, content, exams, and then understanding what the learning activities you will give your class. So now that you have some of the basic ideas on how to put your course together, your next steps will be in instructor-generated content and presentation, including lectures and commentary. Thank you for today, and if you have any questions, please let me know.